There, and welcome to Delightful Dissent. It's episode 23, and today we are looking at the idea that it's all on me with Sophie Turton from The Joyful. Thank you very much for joining us, Sophie.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's great to have you on the show. I'm really keen to get into this one today because I talk to a lot of people who are really interested in changing things for the better, and you know, a huge amount of purpose-led work, and it's great, and it's a really wonderful thing to be doing. But so often, the people I speak to are also kind of carrying the weight of the world and the weight of their work on their shoulders, and I've done loads of that as well. And I'm coming to realize and working on putting it down a bit, because it actually stops you doing what you really could be doing and being as effective as you could be. So I'm really looking forward to getting into this one today. If you're new to the show, Delightful Dissent is really a show about challenging these ideas, challenging the assumptions, and letting go of some of the shoulds that we carry around with us all the time. I work with divergent pathfinders, with people who are doing something different and doing it well. And so often they hit these barriers of these hidden beliefs and these assumptions, and they struggle with them because other people expect them and they're expected to do them, and they just don't work, or they don't work in this context. So this is what this show is about. It's about challenging these things when they don't work. And it's to give you some ideas and some stuff that you might be able to apply to your life. But perhaps more importantly, it's about making this something that everyone does. I want everyone to be able to go out there and say, okay, yeah, this is how it's done. This is, but this doesn't work here. And to be able to go out there and challenge these things themselves. So really, I hope that this show gives you some tips about you being able to challenge the assumptions that matter to you and do that stuff. And it's called Delightful Dissent because, yeah, we are, you know, we're contradicting stuff. We're standing up saying, no, this isn't how it is, or this isn't how it is for us. But it's about doing it in a positive way and in a fun way. It's not about kind of winning and being certainly right. And this is an exploration. You know, we're not holding ourselves up as complete experts. It's a real investigation, and there aren't perfect answers here. There just aren't. So do ask questions of yourself as you're listening, and of us, and really get engaged. If you're watching live, do share any comments, and we will bring them into the conversation as well. If not, we'll be sharing contact details at the end. And this show is genuinely live, so you might notice technical things going wrong. You might notice sounds in the background. You might, and we might talk about some challenging and personal stuff. So there might be difficult topics there, so do just be aware that that's a possibility. And there might be strong language, so do also be aware that that's a possibility. That's it for the introduction. So I'm so pleased to have Sophie on today. We first met, I think it was in a co-working space that we both happened to be in, though it was one of those meetings where it was slightly weird, because I kind of knew Sophie a little bit already, because so many people have been like, have you met? Have you met her? You know, you really should have a conversation. And we did, and it was great. And it's great. I don't think either of us are at that co-working space anymore. I'm certainly not anyway. But it's really great. And I was really struck by her really kind of empathetic but quite direct approach. And it's a really nice combination, really effective combination. And how good she is at finding the right words for things. Which kind of puts a bit of pressure on you now, so sorry about that. I'd if you could, just introduce yourself and your work in a few sentences, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. First of all, quickly talking of finding the right words, divergent pathfinders. I love that as an expression for what you do, and basically you're going to hear me go, what I do, and it's so difficult to find the words to summarize when you're doing something a little bit different from the status quo. So the kind of spiel that I have, the marketing spiel that I have, is that I'm the co-founder and director of a marketing and brand agency called The Joyful. And we've gone through an iteration like divergent pathfinders for the kind of businesses that we work for, or with, and we've stumbled upon. We work with movers, shakers, and change makers, which is basically our way of saying that we work with businesses that are doing something different, and that are, it looks like we've lost Matthew.
I'm still here, but camera issues. It's live.
It's fine, I'll continue. So
Thank you.
So we work with businesses that are doing something different, so businesses that are divergent pathfinders, and we work with them on their brand and marketing and their messaging, to help them to find clarity over their communications and to express themselves in a way that resonates with the right audiences. And then we help to get them in front of those audiences, and build communities around their brand, engage people in their missions, and drive their vision forward, as well as to grow their business. So I like divergent pathfinders. I think that's kind of what we're doing too, but in the marketing and brand world.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's such a tricky thing to do, to kind of come up with these things that really convey a different idea when you are taking that different path. It's because it's a kind of none of the above. And very often it's a kind of none of the above and all of the above at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very difficult thing, because it isn't a conventional category. And yet we need the categories, we need the words. And so I think it's a really great thing you're doing to help people articulate that well and clearly, so that they can get their message out there and reach people in that way, because it is a hard thing to do, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, we've had so many iterations of how we ourselves communicate what we do, that I have so much empathy for businesses who are doing it and who are stuck in that kind of world all the time. It's very difficult to get out of that,
isn't it? Yeah. And I think that does lead us really nicely to the assumption, which is it's all on me. And perhaps one of the first all on me things that I've certainly struggled with, and that most people struggle, or many people struggle with, is like describing the thing. It's all on me to figure out what it is that I do and describe what this thing is and all of everything. And that's like, so many people are like, it's like, I've got to have a website that tells me everything about, and that urge to kind of, be able to articulate it all perfectly to everyone. That sounds like that. Actually, the first all on me is actually feels kind of that.
Yeah, I think there is definitely, and it ties in with that perfectionism, which I think that it's all on me, and the perfectionism and the kind of hard work, entrepreneurial sort of person holding it all up, all comes under the same kind of umbrella. And part of that is really that it's never kind of good enough, and it's on me to figure out how to make it the best it can be, without necessarily realizing that it might already be at each stage in that development the best it can be.
I think that's that stage thing, that iteration thing, is a really important thing to bring in and to mention. And perhaps we can come back to that, because I'd really like to start with what it is that really made you want to talk about the idea that it's all on me today. What's your personal relationship with it?
Oh, well, actually, I really want to start by talking about my relationship with perfectionism as a business leader, because I've never considered myself to be a perfectionist, although I have always been a high achiever, and I have always equated achievement and success to worth. So it's not the art of perfection that I've been striving for, but it is the art of success in whatever form that takes, and then nothing ever being good enough, because once I achieve that next level of success, then it's already been achieved, and now there's always something more. And I really have noticed how hard it is to live in the present moment with that kind of mindset, and how dissatisfied I am, or have been until I started this investigation, with everything, really, because it's never good enough, because it's always something more to strive towards. And we've recently at The Joyful been building a team, and there's now 7 of us, which is really exciting. But I'm seeing it illuminated in myself and my business partner, Alice, so much more, like this concept, it is ego-driven behavior of it's all on me, the buck stops with me, I'm responsible for everything. And it's kind of massively at odds with the way that I want to live my life, and the way that I believe creates a very happy, peaceful, joyful life. So yeah, so it's something I'm massively in the investigation of, and I think it's very important to business owners to think about this topic themselves. As soon as you asked me if I wanted to speak, it was the first thing I thought, yes, this is going to make a good topic.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting because I think perfectionism and idealism form this kind of difficult cycle for me. I've never really identified as a perfectionist because I finish almost nothing. But
what's good enough is done.
I don't have that problem. I have the problem of idealism. And idealism is much more, I think idealism generates procrastination, and it generates the need to do everything before you start. And it can be really, really difficult because it's much more about context. So if you're a kind of context person rather than an execution person, and I am absolutely that, then the idealism is often the monster. But they do kind of feed each other as well. So that's the really difficult bit. You kind of get stuck, and that's where you don't finish, and then it's like it becomes this loop. So I think it's a really, really tricky area, and so many things. And I think a lot of people start stuff out of a dissatisfaction with what is, and I think it's a very strange paradox to be able to kind of accept that what is currently is enough, but it could be better.
Yeah. And I think that's, again, part of the process. Like, going back to what we were talking about with our messaging and how we communicate who we are, I don't think there's a single business that exists that still talks about themselves in the way they did on the first day that they started. And that doesn't mean that the way they spoke about themselves on the first day they started is wrong. It just means that there's been an evolution, and it's got better, and it's got more refined, and there's more clarity, and it's evolved as you've gone. And I think the same applies to humans, to leaders. Like, we are all a work in progress, and it's all an evolution. And really the trick for me is allowing myself to be part of an evolution rather than the force driving it, like to kind of be in flow and allow it to unfold rather than making everything have to be so hard because I'm pushing so much.
I think one of the interesting things I've experienced burnout myself. I've spoken to a lot of other people. It's a big problem for people in general, and the related problem is people who kind of end up trapped in their own success. They make a really great business and they're really happy, and then they're not because it doesn't serve their needs anymore. Or they create a big community and a thriving community, and suddenly there are all these people asking for stuff, and they don't have the energy or the capability or whatever, the interest to be able to meet those needs. And it can feel really, really difficult because it's like it feels like you've invited this thing and then you don't want it. That's a really hard thing to square, to deal with.
Yeah, I've met quite a few people who use the term "the tail started to wag the dog," and they have, as a result, built their business up and started with all the greatest of intentions, but the tail started to wag the dog, and it all just got too much. And so that's when they chose to sell, when maybe that wasn't in their original plan. I think it's so common, and I know a lot of business owners as well who are really making themselves quite poorly in this process of trying to do everything, trying to be everything in the business.
I think that is a really important point. Is psychological health and physical health do go hand in hand, and if you don't attend to this stuff and you don't look after yourself, eventually it won't matter how hard, the harder you try and control it, eventually something will give, and you won't be able to do that. It isn't sustainable in the long run, and you might need short bursts of it, but you can't make it part of your strategy.
No, you really can't. And like I was saying to you before we came on, like I'm really experiencing it firsthand at the moment because of having so much going on at work and having new employees and building a team and have been working 12-hour days and really having to catch myself of glorifying that, because the surface level. There's our conscious awareness, which in my conscious awareness is going, well, it's just so in my subconscious, there will be a part of me that's enjoying it. And I think that's the bit that is about getting really clear on, of like, actually, I am using this as a way to make myself feel worthy in this situation. And I do think that's a large part of where it comes from. There's lots of different varied reasons where it comes from. But when I get really honest with myself, it's not like I'm doing it and just doing it gracefully and quietly. I'm doing it and making sure everyone knows that I'm doing it. And there must be a reason why I'm doing that. Like that's for, there's a payoff in that. There's a reward somewhere in my subconscious mind for this kind of real overly hard work that I'm putting in, and then glorifying myself for it.
Or, and I think reward and avoidance are two sides of the same thing. So it's also something that you don't have to engage with if you can carry on kind of going down that path. And I think this is one of the things that you see, and it's one of the really interesting studies from the psychology of leadership that I came across, is that when leaders kind of fail in organizations, when they really kind of hit a really big barrier, it's not because they've started doing something different. It's because they've done more and more of the same. So a strong, like, directive leader will become an autocrat, and a detail-orientated leader will become a perfectionist who never does anything. Yeah. And so under stress, we become more of ourselves. And I think that is often the really difficult thing, a cycle that you can end up kind of trapped in, a spiral that you can end up stuck in. But knowing where you're going and knowing the pulls for you is a really great way of being able to spot when that's starting.
Yeah, 100%. And also having a community around you that you trust, whether that's your team, your business partner, your partner in another context, or just your community and your wider community, who you can trust to say to you, like, hang on a second, I'm going to call you on this, because what you're doing is creating a cycle for yourself. What you're doing is creating the space in which you feel stuck. Because I was thinking about this, when we run a business, we are the creators of that business in a way that is so incredible. I wouldn't change that for anything. And I often think, like, if I'm the creator of this, it's not really good enough or true enough for me to go, oh, this is all just happening to me, it's just all so stressful, because I'm the creator of this reality. So therefore, how can I choose differently? How am I being that is creating this, and how can I choose differently?
I think that understanding that there are always degrees of freedom that you haven't spotted. There are always paths that other people are aware of and other people can take you down that you might not notice. We filter so much of our perception and so much expectation, and particularly when we, in the working world, in the expectation around planning, one of the negative effects of too much planning is that it tends to give you tunnel vision. You can tend to only see the outcome that you've described, even if there are much better, easier outcomes around it that you kind of ignore because they're not the plan. And I think that, like, holding that whole thing, and particularly when stuff doesn't go in that direction, and integrating the exceptions, the bits where it doesn't work out, holding that all yourself is just a really, really hard thing to do.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's impossible, really. And it's also, I think, if something that this past year has really taught us as business leaders, it's the importance of diversifying, the importance of being flexible, and dynamic. And there's nothing dynamic and flexible about having a rigid plan and sticking to it no matter what. I think for me, my issue is actually less about that, because I'm not really a massive planner. I think my issue's been more around, probably comes from a level of insecurity, but I see it more as my ego kind of flaring up, of it being quite difficult to, and it's because I'm self-aware, I'm able to go, okay, step back, like you're being a bit of a dick, like stop it. But my brain will suddenly be like, who do you think you are? If someone kind of says something to me that's in conflict to the story that I'm telling myself in that moment. And that's been the most challenging thing for me. It's not so much having the plan, it's more building something up and putting so much into something and then relinquishing the control and trusting that actually you don't know it all, and that there are other people in your organization who might really genuinely know it a bit better than you. That's like, what? But it's so empowering for those people when you're able to step back and just allow that to take hold, allow them to take some of the power from how things, or not power, but like some of the you know, drive of how the organization is evolving.
I think that the direction, the sense of direction, and there's two things that the one person trying to hold all of it, and then the other side of that is that it is like is the emergence and allowing it to kind of emerge as it does. And yeah, you've got a direction and you want these things, but the exact form of it, the kind of form it takes, is just kind of happens. I often use the metaphor of growing a plant rather than, like, you know, building a mechanical thing. It's like you create the circumstances, you give it what it needs, you fix anything that's wrong, but it's gonna grow kind of how it wants to grow.
Yeah.
And trying to fight that will reduce how good the outcome is and make your life harder.
Yeah, I really like that as a metaphor. And you know, and understanding that every part of this is oh gosh, my battery is about to run out. I might have to that was the one thing that I didn't get.
Okay, we'll have to add power supplies to the checklist for before the show. So
yes, with that note, just on that note, and then I'm going to leave you for 2 seconds to tell your side of it when I run off.
Cool.
But I think it's about understanding that every element of that flower's growth is equally as important as well. If we go back to my kind of my inner ego going, ooh, what do you mean I'm not the leader of this whole universe? Like, and I'm sure, and I know for a fact, like, that loads and loads of people have that same experience, and that, you know, that shock of the brain when you're in that kind of very confronting situation. And actually it's to realize that, like, as you're a growing organism and an organization and an ecosystem, like, every single part of it is equally as important. And that, for me, that feels really empowering for our teams and for ourselves to be harnessing that kind of culture. And Matthew, give your insights on that while I embarrassingly run off and get my charger. I'll be back in 1 minute.
Cool. So yeah, whilst Sophie goes off and does that, I'm going to talk briefly about complexity theory, because it really does play into this, and I think it's an area that I don't talk about very often. So I'd be really interested in feedback from you in the audience about whether that's something you're interested in hearing more about, because I think that thinking about things as complex systems gives us all sorts of different ways of looking at exactly these problems and how we can work with them better. Not necessarily 100%, or almost certainly not to 100%, but certainly gives us a bit more chance of being successful. And I think that's a really important thing. So yeah, brilliant. Add
that to your list.
Are we all plugged in?
Yes, we're all good.
Excellent. Cool. So yeah, I think now is probably a good time to start thinking about really ways that we can approach this kind of issue, because, you know, we're fairly clear about how it's a problem and what happens. So I think you mentioned, first of all, you know, bringing other people in and connecting with other people. So is there any particular way, you know, people can start going about that? What does that process look like? Yeah,
I really like the word enrollment. I think it's a very inclusive word, and it's kind of all about bringing people into your vision. and sharing why it's important to you. I think that's really important. It's like why it's important to you, what's coming up for you within that context. Like if you can be really honest and vulnerable about it, that's always a really great place to start. And when people understand, the people in your world understand why something's important to you, and they can buy into that vision themselves, then they're much more likely to be able to support you in the way that you need to be supported. And again, especially if you're able to set those really clear expectations and that really clear vision from the start. And I'm talking about that in terms of an organization. So I'm talking about that for bringing employees into that vision, enrolling them as soon as they come into the company, and making sure that you're setting those expectations so that you never get to a point where you just feel like no one gets it, no one understands what I'm trying to do. Like I think we've maybe all been there, like when it just feels impossible, and it's just that kind of rhetoric of, well, I'll just do it myself, then comes up again. And I think it's going to come up, like, isn't it? It's just going to come up. It's just all part of it. But it's just being really, really clear on asking yourself and getting really honest with yourself is how I always go. First of all, I always go to my own self, and how can I be responsible? And it's thinking, actually, have I enrolled these people in this vision? Do they actually know what is expected of them? Do they know why this is important? Do they know how to bring this vision into fruition? Or am I just assuming they do because I know what's in my own head? Like,
yeah, and I think that process, it's one of the really interesting things. I've spent a lot of time in organizations where with a bias to doing and this kind of busy action and just needing to do all the time, and it plays out in individuals as well. And I'm coming to think that, you know, we definitely have enough to do. We probably do too much at work and in life in general, and it gets in the way of actually outcomes. It's not helpful, and it's actually not sustainable. You know, it's the less we do to meet the effects that we want, to create what we want to emerge, the better off everyone is. And which is a strange way to think about work when it's all like more, you know, we want more customers, more work, you know. It's like less customers would be good, but different. You know, it's a different relationship, I think.
Yeah, it comes back to what we were saying earlier about or before this call, about the kind of glorification of hard work, and this language around how things need to be hard, and how for some reason we've affiliated hard with worthy. Like, work hard and you'll get blah. Like, hard work pays off. It's all about having to be hard. And so our mindset is, if it's not hard, then I must not be doing it right. Or if it's not hard, then that means that I'm not worthy in some way. So I do think subconsciously humans make life harder for themselves than they need to, as a form of validation. And there's other things maybe we just haven't been taught how to simplify, because the hard rhetoric's quite convenient. It keeps us small and busy, so we can't think too hard about too many things. But you're right. Like, actually, if it's hard, it's not right, is my mentality. Like, for me, if something's right, it flows, and it feels effortless, and it feels graceful and easy, and like really just like a harmony. And when it's hard, it feels like worthiness, because that's what I've been taught is worthiness. But it also feels like a lot of headaches and sleepless nights and tiredness.
Yeah, it feels almost like, I think that keeping a small thing is a really interesting thing. Is like, it feels like earning your right to change things.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, you can challenge things, but it's going to be really hard. So you can't do it very much.
Don't do it. Well,
don't do it.
Think about it. Like, I mean, we spoke before about, like, the reason we have this work culture in the first place is because of the Industrial Revolution. Before that point, everybody worked in the fields. They only needed to work for what they needed to survive. They had a totally different mentality. And then they came into the factories for the first time, and they would leave halfway through the day because, well, why would I stay for a whole day? I don't need to. So the factory owners got really smart and they created the school system. And that is why we have the culture of work that we do today, and why we have the school systems that we do today that are still have not been changed or updated since the Industrial Revolution. And I think actually, thinking about why I'm so passionate about this topic, it's because of that. Like, we have a culture that is sick, stressed and worried about everything and striving all the time and disconnected. And it all comes down to this idea that we've got to work really hard and prove ourselves in this way and push and churn and churn. And it's just actually, like you said, it's simply not true, but we don't have the space to think or be with that belief, changing that belief. So we just keep on the treadmill of it all the time.
It feels downright rebellious to turn around and say, actually, I don't want to do more. I don't want to buy more. I don't want to, I don't want to do this. We have a system that's really very based on compulsion, and all of these different kind of lines up, all these, I'm compelled to behave this way and compelled to behave that way. And that creates a whole load of tension. Yeah. And I think one of the really interesting things is, how can we work with less tension and still meet our needs and still meet the needs of the people, around us. But how can we be a bit less tense with it? And I mean that almost on a physical level. I think, one of the things about effort that one of my favorite concepts I mentioned on the show before is from yoga is sukha, is kind of ease, but it's ease in doing something hard. Yeah, it's finding the ease. Yeah, active ease. That's a great way of putting it. And actually working on that, intending towards that in the work that you're doing. How can we actively move towards an easier position and an easier way to do this and an easier way to achieve what we all want to achieve is a really such a valid question to ask in an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, one of the ways that we at the Joyful are kind of exploring this is for complete integrity purposes, I have to say right here that we're exploring this for our team, for our clients, for how we give back to the community, which is extremely important to our ethos and the planet. We haven't quite mastered how we do this for ourselves as leaders, which is why we're in this investigation. But how we think about, like, how can we create a structure that celebrates ease, that doesn't glorify people working overtime, that doesn't glorify someone staying until, like in London in creative agencies, like the first person to leave gets penalized. And I think the first person to leave at the end of the day, when they're no longer contracted to be there, should be celebrated, because those people are doing something very radical in a London agency. They're standing up for their right as a human being to have a life outside of that agency. And like, that is not the culture of an agency. And I feel like that's where we can start to go, like, how are we perpetuating this myth? How are we creating this experience of living for those who work for us or those who work with us? And how can we start thinking about that a bit differently? Like, even just answering emails on a weekend, like, no. Like, you know what? Like, when we do that, we're saying, yeah, that's fine, that's okay. Like, your business needs come before my personal needs. There is no boundaries,
I think that need to rest, to recover, is hugely important, and to reflect. It lets your brain do different things. It lets you get your energy back. It lets you be more effective. There's again, there's really interesting research around our capability, like just the human level of capability of doing certain sorts of work. And we're doing knowledge work. We're at about, we only really have about 40 hours in us in an ideal situation of before it starts to drop off very quickly. In fact, it starts to drop off at about 30, 35, and then drops off even faster at about 40. By about 50 hours a week, we introduce so many more mistakes that we'd be better off not doing the work. That's how strong an effect it is. We become counterproductive at about 50 hours a week.
Yeah, and we become counterproductive. And really, I mean, I consider myself to be, I think anyone who knows me would think that I was an extremely joyful person. Like, naturally, I am full of energy. But as soon as I go past that point, I start to become so grumpy, so unapproachable, and so not myself. And so it's also, you know, you're unproductive in the kind of what your output is in terms of your work, but also in terms of the relationships that you're having and the energy that you're creating around you, and all of these things that are much more subtle, but still equally as important to life and business.
And I find, certainly when I get in this situation, I actually find it really hard to reach out and get help. It gets harder to get help. It's a weird situation. Like, the more I need help, the harder it is to reach out and get help.
Yeah, and people come to me and ask me if I get like almost offended. I can do it. Go on.
Yeah, I'm doing it. I need to finish this.
Can't you see I'm doing it? And I'm fine.
And I think it's really interesting to think about, you know, how you do kind of, first of all, how you create a situation where it is easier for you to get help in the first place. And second of all, how you do, you know, when you do end up in that situation, because none of us can be perfect, and searching, like, you know, I think one of the greatest traps around this kind of self-development, kind of personal effectiveness space, is accepting it from all of the stuff that it talks about and being like, okay, so I'm going to be perfect about not being a perfectionist. I'm going to do this perfectly.
I'm going to spend loads of time figuring out how I no longer have to spend loads of time doing stuff.
I actually do that, so okay. That's kind of the story of my life. I feel quite called out by that one.
It's okay. It's just a mirror, Matthew. It's the same for me. Like a whole shelf of just like how to run your business by clockwork, and I'll read like half of it. And then I'm too busy to read the rest of it, and then I'll read half of that.
That's a great idea, but I'll never get around to implementing it because I'm too busy. I think that whole thing, and, you know, how we work with this, I think it's also a really important thing, you know, you raised. We're talking about this because it matters, because it's an issue we're both exploring, because it's something that's present for us. And actually bringing people into that, bringing your colleagues, your clients, like, and sharing it in the content you create. These are open questions. I think that's a really important thing. It's like, it's okay you don't have to have the answer to this. You can say, I have this set of answers and I have this set of struggles, and this is the thing I'm working on right now. And that's a really powerful way to connect with clients, aside from anything else.
Yeah, 100%. Like my strategy for growing the Joyful brand and business is always through authentic communication and storytelling, because actually, like, when you engage somebody in the investigation, and curiosity is one of my personal values, and I really love the word investigation, because I think the whole of life is an investigation. Like, no one has it figured out. No book that you can buy is going to help you to figure it out. It's just one person that might have had like some theory that worked for them, and someone else who bought their book, you know. And you can guarantee that your clients, other business owners, are also going to be having similar struggles. But because we live in a culture that tells us, again, I will bang on about that Industrial Revolution because it's not good, although it is the reason that we are here today. But you know, we live in a world that has been kind of created in this businesses aren't supposed to have human emotions. Like, business leaders aren't supposed to, like, it's not professional to show your emotions. And so we kind of are all trapped in little boxes of our own creation, not voicing what's actually going on for us. And so actually, when you open it up and go, hey, I'm really struggling with this, and I'm really trying to find a solution, and it would really help to involve you in part of that solution, that gives them permission to be also like, oh yeah, that's something I'm dealing with as well.
And then it becomes something that you can both use a different set of skills to work on together. And I think that's always the really powerful part. It's a shared problem, a shared pain, but one that you can use your unique talents to work on with other people, and that makes the change much more effective and likely to happen and sustainable and all of those things. But I think it is really hard. And for me, certainly my experience as I've been kind of learning and playing with this is it gets easier the more you do it. It's one of those things that's a practice. You try it and you do it, but that you can't do it well anyway in a straight away in any circumstance. So it's about starting small. It's about iterating, trying it out, and being like, okay, well, I want to open up about this particular thing, and it's a small thing. It's okay if it doesn't work out. It's not a deal-breaking thing, and the whole company is not riding on it. My whole well-being isn't riding on it. But it's a thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I can share that. And actually, this is one of the reasons I really like. I like doing Delightful Dissent. Actually, it's because it is an opportunity for us to do this and to open up a little bit in a more public space. It's for many people around, you think about, if you look at all of the really slick content out there, particularly LinkedIn's a really big one for this, like the really corporate like stuff with all the slidey titles and like, people reading word perfectly off what's blatantly a script and doesn't really have that feel of energy, and it doesn't engage in quite the same way. And I think opening it up is actually a lot more engaging for colleagues as well. And I think this your idea of enrollment I really, really like. And you're kind of it's funny, we use the word enterprise around businesses sometimes, and I think I prefer that as a description. It's like a joint enterprise. It's a bunch of people going in a certain direction, but they're not really sure where they're going.
And I think the key point there is it's a bunch of people going in the same direction, except that how many organizations, businesses do you know where they're not all going in the same direction? And I mean, I've worked for many of them, and all you have to do is look at the top, and if you see at the top of that organization a leader who thinks it's all on them, who doesn't empower their employees and their teams to be part of driving in that same direction, that's when the atoms start to go like all kinds of like fiery, and it's chaos. And I really feel that's true. Like if a leader is able to share the responsibility for the outcome, share the energy for the driving forward to the same outcome, and make every single person in that organization feel equally as valuable in the achieving of that vision, that to me, that is the secret to a successful organization. Like, because your people are absolutely the key to your success, right? They really are. And if you're a one-person business, that still applies, because then it's about the relationship that you build with your clients. It's then about enrolling them into your greater vision, which could be how you choose to set your boundaries. It could be how you choose to work. Like, I've worked with people before and they're like, you know what, I'm not down for like loads of emails and like writing things down. Like they're neurodivergent. It just doesn't work for them to do that. They're like, I'm going to send you WhatsApp voice notes and that's how we're going to communicate. And I'm like, okay, if I have the information, I don't care how it gets to me. And it's because they've explained to me their why and they've enrolled me in how it's going to work, and I understand the boundaries. And it's not typical at all of how to do business, but it still works.
And I absolutely think, and I think there's a huge fear about doing it different, like doing the basics of work different. And there's millions of, there's all sorts of ways you can make a successful organization. And the one thing that I really notice that successful organizations and successful people do is there are so many books that are like, get up early and you'll be successful, or do this one thing,
15 hours and you'll get more done.
And it's like, when you really look at it, yes, there are like some people who get up early are more successful. But when you look at it, there are also some people who get up much later who are successful. What it really is figuring out what's best for you and doing that is what makes you successful. And it's like it doesn't matter what that is, as long as it matches what you need.
Yeah. And isn't it so funny how for so many of us, what we need is the last thing that we ask ourselves. We try to fit into a model that, because it's worked for someone before, it's worked for a specific business before, or what have you. And I mean, it's only really been very recently that I've started to ask the question, like, what do I need? Like, what actually works for this context, this team, this individual human me? And it's really, really interesting how that question doesn't come naturally to so many of us.
It's a really hard thing to ask. And for me, I think, it's about there's this sense of demand, and that if I don't meet people's expectations and don't meet people's demands, then they'll think less of me, or they'll think it's a problem. And one of the interesting things is I don't do any interactive work with anyone until after midday. I don't take meetings in the morning. I just don't. And I don't attend events, and I don't run events. So and sometimes I'm like, oh, I really wish I could go to that, but it's at 9:30. It's at 9 in the morning, and I'm not doing that because I have that space for me, and I use that for different things. And it's a part of my day, but it's not available to others for that. But because I need that, and I think that. But when I first did it, I was like, oh God, people are going to be like, oh, I demand to meet you at 10 o'clock. No one does that. Everyone just like looks at the calendar and chooses a time that works for them, and it works fine, and it works really well because it means I can do shows in the evening with loads of energy, and it means I can work with people in America with loads of energy, and it suits me better. And I could equally imagine someone doing the exact opposite and being like, I only do interactive stuff until 1 in the afternoon, and then that's me, But it's about finding that thing that works for you and the people that you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just getting really honest with yourself about it. And I think it's really important to say that like nobody puts as hard expectations on us as we put on ourselves. And like most people are just like, yeah, that's cool. Doesn't even occur to them to be like, oh, weirdo, won't meet me at 10. Like
it's this weird thing. I almost like particularly, I think there's a sense as a leader that you almost feel ashamed that you have needs.
Yeah.
It's like you're ashamed that you need to sleep, that you need to eat. What the French call the English lunch, which is eating lunch at your desk.
I'm guilty of that, definitely.
And that's it's like it's almost like there's a fear of that actually being human. Having a human need to eat and to sleep is that you can't have those if you're somehow be successful or be effective or be valid or worthwhile. And I think it's such a sad and it's the opposite of joyful to be in that situation, I think. And but it's a very easy loop to fall into, and there's a lot of pressure to go that way.
Yeah, 100%. And I think if there's one key takeaway from this conversation that I certainly have had remembered, because I've remembered it many times and just forgotten it again, is that it is just that, like it's about the self-inquiry of what do I need and how can I create the environment for myself and enroll those around me into that vision that I have for my business, but also for my life, me as an individual, who just because I'm a business leader does not mean that I'm any less entitled to my life as anyone else is. And what do I want and need, and how can I make it work for me? Because it is a radical way of being, isn't it? To really walk the talk of showing to the world how to prioritize self so that you can show up as your best self for others. And I think that's a massive theme of today, and I love it because it's so important and it's so hard to execute it because we're not it's because of the Industrial Revolution, but it's because but we're not taught that at school, and we're certainly not taught that in the more kind of corporate world, which genuinely just wants to eat your soul and can't believe that you would ever do anything other than prioritize the company you work for.
Yeah, and I think it's, for me, as I think the revolution thing is really funny. I'm kind of imagining this internalized angry Victorian man in a big stovepipe hat with big kind of pork chops shouting at me, telling me to do more stuff, and that kind of is in there somewhere. And it feels like that, the kind of factory whistle, and the kind of it's a really strange thing. And I think actually being able to say, like, what is it I need help with? What are my needs? What is uncomfortable here? Where is the tension? Where am I seeking help? And starting with that, like right now. And I think it's the other thing. I get drawn off into the really big picture very easily. I like it there.
I do too.
I'm naturally, I'm not that good at executing things, so I tend to compensate for that by getting quite good at strategy. And so it's like, so I choose really, really good strategies because I'm not very good at carrying them out. and so but everyone does this. Everyone kind of chooses their area of strength and compensates for their areas of weakness. But like, where are you looking for help, and actually allowing yourself to let it be simpler, let it be easier? You know, what are the little bits, and not trying to solve it all at once, just a one thing, and trying it out and going for that, but doing it in connection with people, doing it in community, in with your colleagues, with your partner, with your business partner or your life partner, whatever it is. It's actually about kind of allowing yourself to do that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's an open invitation that I'm sure you just cannot refuse, where you've got two people who completely understand what this experience is like, who are absolutely, I mean, my virtual door is always open for anyone who wants to reach out and just have a chat if it feels like way too much of a step to kind of reach out to your people in your immediates. It sometimes is easier to have a chat with a relative stranger about something. And I think I can speak for both of us, Matthew, when I say that we absolutely are here for this kind of conversation. I think it's so important for leaders to start investigating how to show up differently and to support one another, because when we can support one another, it's just going to make it so much easier for those who come next to us and who follow in our footsteps to do the same.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, and for me, a lot of my experience is for the first steps to this are easier in community, because you find a community of people that are really like you in a certain way. It's easier just to try it out. It can be quite playful, because if it goes wrong, you can just be like, it didn't work out. It doesn't have very high stakes, and you can try it on and see whether it works. Because from my experience is that it's actually very hard to figure this stuff out, to think it through. It's not predictable, but by doing it, you get a sense very, very quickly. But the trouble is, by doing it, if you're doing it, it's kind of for real. Mm-hmm. So what you can do is actually be quite playful with trying this stuff out in the right space. And it's like, you watch kids, they're like, they put on a different hat and they're a different person. It's like, okay, you can kind of create a space where that's okay, and we can all play with that. And that's a really helpful way to break down some of the weight of all of this stuff, and just the consequential, the just endless stream of consequences from the decision that can become unbearable so fast. Yeah,
absolutely. I just love that concept of play and try it on, just see what happens. And I love that. Like, I can see we're coming to the end of the show, and one real resonant point to say is, like, we don't have to take ourselves so seriously. Like, just because business is supposedly super serious business, like, actually it really doesn't have to be. It can be so much more about the play and the investigation and the celebration of all of the different facets of being human. And I really feel like that's how businesses can really start to change the world, change the damage done by the Industrial Revolution. Sorry.
It's for me, it's reimagining what business is about and what work is about, and thinking about, you know, we've created all of these things as humanity, you know, and somehow we have this habit of creating things and then serving them. It's like, okay, so it's like, but actually for me, like, business is something that can be in the benefit of humanity if we choose it to be. Money is something that can be in the benefit of humanity. It's not beyond us. It's a human invention. It's not a thing of nature. The market is not God. You know, it's a different thing. And we can think about, and the place to start with this is with ourselves and with our own businesses and with the people around us. And like, okay, well, we can make this a thing for our benefit and for our community's benefit. And then we spread it out. We don't have to solve everything again, you know, but starting and moving in that direction for us and the people around us feels like a good first place to start.
Yeah. And again, like asking ourselves, like, does it feel good? Because that's a really good indication of whether we're taking the right steps for ourselves. And if it feels good, then we might be on the right track. If it feels good for the team, if it feels good for the clients, you know, it's an ecosystem, and we all need to be feeding into it together. And that I feel like that is a really great way to move forward to a place where we're not just piling work on top of ourselves and running around feeling like we're about to collapse from the weight of it all.
I love that. As a kind of, if you'll permit me to kind of summarize a bit, just to wrap it up, I think that as an approach, thinking about business a bit less and feeling it a bit more feels like a really, really great way to kind of start doing this stuff. So yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. That's a really quite interesting. Didn't go where I was quite expecting, which is really lovely. And I think it's always great on this show when that happens. So thank you so much for coming on today. It's been great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I'm realizing this is fast becoming my favorite thing to talk about. So anyone wants to have a chat to me about it, I am 100% available.
Brilliant. So do you have anything where particularly coming up that you'd like people to, if people do want to get in touch, obviously we've got your LinkedIn on the in the show notes, so people can get in touch there. But is there anything specifically you're looking at the moment that in exactly in the spirit of this, really, that you're doing in this way?
Yeah, so we are in the process of creating we're calling it the Joyful Academy, and it's got two separate parts. There's the Joyful Business Academy and the Joyful Living Academy, but they all feed into each other, because really our ethos is that the business needs to work for our lives, and businesses need to work for the planet and for the lives of everybody. So we're putting together lots of different courses, and we've got one launching on the 19th of March, which is called the Thought Leadership Lab, which is exactly what we've just spoken about. It's a collaboration with Abigail Rebecca, who is from Illuminated Leaders, and myself and Alice, my business partner. And what it is a combination of our technical know-how, marketing know-how, messaging and identity, and finding your audience, and Abby's mindset and moving through like blockages that might stop you from being visible, or fears around being visible. So it's going to be like a smorgasbord of experiential learning over 12 weeks, which is going to really push people to step into their communication power and be more visible for themselves and for their businesses. And the reason that it's super appropriate to this is because the whole thing is an experiential, experimental, playful journey. It's our beta launch of it, so we're offering it at a ridiculously low price, so that everybody who enters knows that what they're getting themselves into is a Willy Wonka's chocolate factory of of online learning. And there's going to be challenges, and we're totally willing to be challenged as well, to step out of our comfort zone and really look at where we're not being visible. Cool. So if that sounds like something that you'd be interested in, Matthew, I'll send you the link to the information about that as well, so you can put that in the comments.
Yeah, brilliant. Just stick a comment on YouTube with it.
Oh,
that would be brilliant.
I have the power to do that.
You do.
So yeah,
there'll be a comment there, which is brilliant. So that's on the 19th of May. Is that the you're
Yeah, the launch party is on the 19th of May, and we kick off officially on the 26th. And it will be a series of live, weekly live training and coaching and integration weeks. And you will leave with this amazing brand book homework kind of structure that basically is your roadmap to visibility as a thought leader, and also to get your business out there and the things that you care about, like, for example, the Industrial Revolution.
Fantastic. That's great. So, okay, well, yeah, thank you very much. I'm still seeing the Victorian. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for watching. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it does kind of raise some questions for you as well. And do reach out to Sophie and to me to carry on the conversation. I think it's a great one to do, and yeah, just kind of taking that first step is often the difficult thing, and whoever is around. And I think quite often when I watch people online, I'm like, oh god, they're online, they're amazing, and I can't talk to them. My experience is I actually want these conversations. That's why I do this show. Yeah. And so it is, we are talking to people like us. If you're watching this show, you are like us. You are, and so it's okay to come reach out and talk. So I think that's a really important point to make.
Yeah, please do reach out.
Brilliant. So next episode is I'm going to be talking to Kirsty Starmer, and we're going to be talking about the idea that you should do what you set out to do. And that idea that you've got to carry it out and do exactly what you planned is definitely relates to this in really interesting ways. Again, it's not intentionally planned, but it's the way that this happens. And I think, it seems like really good advice to finish everything and carry it through, but very often there are really big consequences to pushing through to the bitter end and kind of carrying on with exactly the path that you planned, even when there's really different paths available and better ways to go. So it really does relate to this, and kind of sensing into the complexity and the change of all of this. So that's going to be at 1 p.m. or 1 p.m. UK time on Wednesday, the 5th of May. So please do join us then. Do check out the other episodes. There's loads of other episodes, and do reach out and kind of start a conversation with me or Sophie. And in the meantime, I hope to see you again very soon, but go out there and make some delightful dissent of your own. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.